Now, I believe that to succeed in a world that is interdependent, fast changing, the power relationship shifting, we have to be open. The people that succeed, the companies that succeed, the countries that succeed, will be those that are open to new ideas, open to new energy, to innovation, open to a spirit, if you like, of the future. Because this force of globalization is going to continue. And by the way, contrary to what people think, it is driven by people, not by governments. It's people that are making this happen. They are voting with their lifestyle, with their attitude. So this choice, open versus closed, in my view, can only sensibly and successfully be resolved by being open. And this brings us to education. Because if that is right, if it's not just a question of a company's or a country's wealth being in their human capital, but it is also about the nature of the human being in the modern global community, then education becomes absolutely central. Central not just to a nation, but central to the individual's chance to succeed. And that is why basically around the world today, governments are trying to reform their education system to develop their human potential. And here's the interesting thing in my experience, and I fought long and hard on education reform in my country, along with healthcare reform and other things. And by the way, one preliminary point, reform and change is the hardest thing to do in any organization, in any political party, in any country. I mean, what I found about change when I was trying to make it was that when you propose a change, everybody tells you it will be a disaster. When you're making the change, it is hell. And after you've made the change, everyone assumes it was always like that. And I recall with my healthcare reforms, actually, I was right in the middle of my most difficult healthcare reforms, and they were very strongly opposed by the professional body within healthcare. And unfortunately, I had to go into hospital for a small operation. So I was lying there on the hospital bed, and the anaesthetist came in with a very large needle. He leans over the bed and he says to me, Prime Minister, this may be the last chance I get to say this to you. When he goes on, I just have to tell you, I'm afraid I'm totally opposed to your healthcare reforms. So, anyway, as a strong leader, what did I do? Did I say, that's tough, I'm just carrying on? Or did I say, I think we should talk about this, you know, let's be reasonable. No, it's really difficult to make reform, and particularly in the education field, actually. But of some comfort to all people operating in this field, everybody around the world is trying to deal with the same problem. And certain key lessons emerge. And look, when we examine the situation here in Brazil, and I speak with humility as an outsider, there are many good things that are happening. The enrollments are up. Adult literacy is up. The spending, obviously, has been increased. You know, if you look at the research papers coming from academia, there's been a major increase and so on. But you would still accept that you have a lot to do. And one point of comfort may be that so would virtually every country and every government I know today. So now is a good moment to say, well, when we look around the world and see how education systems are changing, what are the key lessons that come from this? And I would identify them as these. The first is that today, education has to be for life. Right? In other words, when I was growing up, you went to school at 5, you left at 14 or 16 or 18, or if you went to university, which was a small minority in those days in my country, left university at 21, that was that. You were educated. Right? Today, preschool education matters. Yeah. But so does post-university education matter. For someone like me, and I make a joke about the technology, but actually I have to learn about it today. There's nobody who is not going to require, as an adult, continual reskilling, upskilling. And as countries develop, by the way, the old thing that used to happen when I was growing up as a child in the northeast of England, someone would become in that part of the world, a coal miner. And they would work for the same company all their lives, they'd retire at the end. That's not what's happening anymore, certainly in our country. And as development happens, people change jobs more often. Today, we cannot afford to be without not just good standard education systems, but the ability for people to upgrade their skills throughout their life. And in preschool education, all the evidence is that the earlier children get to learn, the better it is when they are at school. And then, of course, at school, it is absolutely necessary to have the quality. But education today is for life. That is the first thing. The second thing is it must be for all. You will know very well your challenges of education here. In terms not of the numbers, because numbers can be misleading, but in terms of the quality. But frankly, I can tell you, if you look at any major European country today, or you look at the United States of America, you've got the same challenge. I mean, I always used to say in the UK, we educate an elite brilliantly, we educate another section moderately, and then you've got a large part of the population that may have a basic education or may even not. But even that basic education is not of the quality that is necessary to survive and prosper in today's world. So the only thing that will work today in Brazil, but anywhere, is if we are setting as our ambition an education system of quality for all and not just for an elite. Because here is the thing. As a country develops, its economy has to move up the value-added chain. There are low labor cost countries that will compete and knock us out. And it's like, sometimes in the UK, people used to complain about, companies outsourcing to low labor cost countries. And I used to say to them, that's the world. Yeah. We've got to move up the value-added chain. And that's why education is important. So if you take the numbers in tertiary education here, this is going to have to increase significantly, not just to reach the OECD average, but to get beyond that. So the second thing is that our ambition, our goal, has got to be education for all. The third is that the curriculum has got to be relevant for today. That is about basic skills. It's also about other things, though. I remember when I was fighting the 1997 campaign to be Prime Minister, and I visited a school, and we were making education a big theme. And I went into the school and was greeted by the headmaster. But in the school lobby, there's a fight going on amongst the students. I mean, a proper fight. And I remember the headmaster saying to me, "I think we better go and talk elsewhere. It's a bit noisy here." And I said to him, "Don't you think you should stop that first?" "No," he said, "no, I wouldn't do that." So we went to the room next door. It's not just about curriculum in the sense that we debate it. It's about discipline and order in schools as well. This is quite a sensitive subject to talk about. But one thing I was absolutely emphatic about when I was Prime Minister in our education system is that if kids are taught in classes where there isn't proper discipline, they suffer. I mean, let's be clear about that. So the curriculum is, yes, it's about basic education, it's also about social skills, and it's also about learning that if you want to do well in life, believe it or not, you've got to turn up for time on work, you've got to be prepared to get on with other people, and you've got to behave yourself. It may sound very crude, but actually, if you think about it, it's what we expect from the people we work with. The fourth thing is, around the world today, people are developing ideas around new providers of education. I mean, Laureate's a very interesting example as a provider, private provider of education, 24 different countries in the world. And that is a reasonably well-established idea in the university sector. We introduced in the UK academy schools, which were schools which were public-private partnerships, where successful entrepreneurs or companies would also help in the creation and running of the schools. They would have a lot more freedom over how they presented themselves. They're rather similar to the charter school idea in the US. And, you know, I think this is a very, very difficult thing to say and very controversial in certain quarters. But in every walk of life today, there's innovation. You know, innovation in how we produce things, innovation in how we manage things, innovation in how we perform. It would be odd if that weren't also true, or potentially true, in education. So one of the main reforms that we introduced, and if you look around the world today, this is happening in many different countries, is you also need to free up what can be sometimes a very monolithic public sector. Now, that brings me to a fifth point, which is that is often not very popular, and where we'll have teachers here as well in the audience today. You know, I know how much difference great teachers made to me in school. And I have, incidentally, immense respect for anyone who does teach. I mean, it's a vocation, it's a challenge, it's very difficult. And it can be particularly difficult when dealing with situations in which, you know, you're trying to make changes in your education system, and professional bodies and others will resist those changes. Now, I was describing the resistance in healthcare. I actually had quite a major challenge with some of the teachers' unions when I was pushing through education reform. I think the idea is to make the teachers' unions and representatives partners, but I do think it's important that they understand that they don't have a veto on change. And that in the end, the people that come first, and always first, are the pupils, are the children, the students.